Okay, this is a very common subject, tuning your guitar and playing in tune is maybe a little bit more advanced concept, playing in tune. Reason for that, I think, is a lot of people look at the guitar as an equal tempered instrument like a piano because it has frets. So you would assume that each fret, if the guitar was built properly, has a equal tempered note relative to any other note. But the truth of the matter is that the strings are kind of malleable in terms of pitch. When you press down, the pitch isn't going to be 100% one frequency. It kind of if you slow down a recording of any single note, you hear it go wah, wah, wah. Even the open strings vibrate a little bit. If you play harder, you might have noticed at some point the pitch goes a little sharp because you activate it very violently, and then it kind of settles down. If you play very soft, it's going to be a little more true to whatever the note is tuned to. Now, before I sound like a crazy person about playing in tune at the same time as tuning your guitar, there's a lot of arguments and a lot of different methods about tuning. I just want to say that number one thing you can do is tune with a tuner, a digital tuner where you hit the green light, whatever your method of or type of tuner. Assuming those are 440, you'll be able to play with a keyboard or any other instrument, or at least know your strings are open strings are tuned to that. And that's the best, most accurate way to do it. But I think that second to that, and maybe more important, is to just use your ears. Use these flaps on the side of your head and learn how to hear when something's in tune or not. It's good both for singing and matching up with others. And sometimes the instruments aren't tuned to a 440. You got to match with them, And I've seen a lot of guitar players in my life tune their guitar perfectly fine with a tuner and then proceed to play out of tune. And I'll show you how that happens various ways. And I think it's more of anything a case of the ear, to know how to play relatively in tune to yourself and to other musicians. I figured this stuff out as a teenager because I was really into Van Halen, rock band, and I had this cheap guitar that was a copy of Van Halen's guitar, but it had a different kind of neck. And I was just dreaming about this different kind of neck, this maple neck with the headstock that bends down, a hockey stick, they call it. And so I saved up my money and I bought this other neck. The other neck had 22 frets, and the one I had that I was replacing had 21. And I remember my dad telling me, hey, this is not going to work, dude. It's going to be out of tune. And I didn't believe him and didn't understand. And I put the new neck on, and I came face to face with this concept of equal temper tuning and intonation and all this, that, there's ways to hear notes that are in tune or out of tune. And I'm going to try to show you real quick with my guitar. I deliberately just tuned it out of tune at random. And I'm going to show you how I tune my guitar the fastest way. I'm not going to do it fast like I normally do it. I'm just going to show you how I do it step by step. This is an old metronome. Gives you an A440 supposedly. I don't know if it is exactly. It doesn't matter. We're talking about relative pitch here. This is how I tune. That note is supposed to be up here somewhere. Obviously my strings are not in tune. So what I do is first, I got my A, open A. The best thing is to just match it by an octave. But if you can't hear how to do that because the beats are off, you can use the harmonic at the 5th fret. And what happens there, that's the same note. And so I tune it up or down. So let me show you. If I go too far, you'll hear this wave. You want that to come down so that there's no beat. So it's too high. I drop it down. It's good to go below it, just to be sure, then back up. So sometimes you can't tell if the waves are going up or down, above or below the note. So you kind of play around with it till you hear no beats for as long as possible. Infinity would be perfect. Nobody needs to be perfect. Like I'm going to say, as soon as you put your finger on the fingerboard, you have an ability to change the pitch. What I did right there is just changing the pitch forward and back, up and down. If you do it this way, sorry, it's only up. and back to the pitch. But if you go side to side, you go up and down. I'll show you why in a second. Anyway, so that's the A 440 supposedly. And maybe you have a different reference point. Like I said, electric tuner or another instrument. You can always check, see if it sounds consonant with the note. Alright, once you're done with that, you got one note. So you want to try to match it to the other notes. Now this is where people get in arguments about it because of the sense in between the equal tempered scale that they want to argue one is flatter than another or whatever. I just say, look, you got to hear those beats and they have to be consonant. Because if you're dealing with off sense and there's a vibration, I consider that out of tune. So, you know, you can argue with it all you want. This is the easiest way to hear it because you hear those beats in the harmonics. So my first note was lower, boom, boom. So I'm trying to match that same note. Now some people argue that this is gonna make my E note not true. But let me just say this. If you're gonna play this, which is a fourth interval, you can double check that too. It should be a fourth. If I wanted to make it like that, it's gonna be off. You can just tune to fourths. If you can hear it, it's a little muddy. It's gonna be in tune. So I can do the same thing for the D string. It's low. Go above it and down. There's a doing it until I hear a perfect interval. Now my strings are dead. You can see how old and crusty they are. When the strings go dead, they tend to go sharp up the scale because they lose material and they thin out. So, you know, the best that you can tune the guitar is just to open strings because you're gonna have to deal with the guitar being out of tune in other positions. So you change the strings and get new strings on there. So I'm just using this as an example, the best I could, the oldest strings I had at hand, just to show my point here. Anyway, so this is a perfect fourth. Double check it like that because keep going above and below because there's a sympathetic vibration on this note, and I'll show you about harmonics in a second. Other notes will vibrate sympathetically to any single note you play, but if the open string is available to ring, you'd have to mute them to not. You know, sometimes it's good to mute the other strings so you can really hear whether or not those two are in tune. Now if I check that with the same harmonics, it's right on. There's not any adjustment needed to be made. And I just did that with my ear for the fourths. Now these notes are different. Okay, this is the octave, and then on the next string it's the fifth of the D string. But they're consonant. So if the cents are off by in a computer, you know, like if you analyze the frequency, it doesn't matter because they're in tune with each other now. And if I want to play a chord, I want it to sound like this. I don't want it to sound with a slight wave going. Because if I make them off a little bit, it's going to have a wave, and then it's going to mess up the rest of the any other. If I want to play in a weird key or something, it's going to be messed up. The same thing for the third string. As I get as close as I can, and then you check with those harmonics, you'll see. It's right on. Now if I just did this and tune the guitar quickly, you know, in a noisy environment it's hard to hear the fourths. They're a little muddy if there's background noise. But these harmonics are very clear and where you can hear if the beats are off. Doing it that quickly, I can tune the guitar up in like 2 seconds. It's like really fast, and I trust it because so far it seems to be the quickest and the safest thing to work out. Now we got to get rid of this problem here. Because the B string is a third. The thirds are really off in the equal tempered system, or they're more accepted to be off. So you want, but the fifths and the fourths, they sound horrible if they're off. So you gotta really have your fourths and your fifths be pretty close to what you want them to be in terms of in tune with each other. So the B string, the simplest thing for me is to match it to the 7th fret. Again, for some people this is a big no-no. Don't ever do that because one of this note's supposed to be sharp or something. I don't know what it is, but That's a bunch of baloney to me because it's in tune. If I had its note be any other note than this one, it's going to be out of tune with everything else I play. So it's got to be not like this, you know, it's got to be right on tune with that note. And I'll show you why in a second. Because when I do this, if I do the same thing for the high E, you'll notice I matched that up. Now that was the 5th string. So if I do the 5th string and the top, you know, you hear that it's consonant. It doesn't sound. You can actually tune just to the 5ths like this. Now, assuming these are correct, and this is correct, and this is correct, then this should be a 4th, and it is. That's what's amazing. This is a perfect 4th. There's no weird beats about it. I can play 5th intervals, and these strings are old as hell, and meaning they're not true even up in a higher position. And it doesn't matter, because it does matter, but this is the best I can do. This is the best I can do with these old strings and this guitar. You know, that's the best I can do. These open strings now are in tune to each other, the best they can be. So now, if you know, I can use a digital tune. I don't even have one anymore. It broke, and I don't even use it anymore. I don't need it because we play in tune together with other musicians, and we're always in tune because we use these. Okay. Sometimes use a drum machine's got a bass line, and we tune to the bass line so that we're in tune with the bass line. But that's it. You know, we don't need once we have that, we got to sing and play in tune with each other. All right, now how do we play in tune? Now, once you get these open strings tuned, you can check chords. And they'll all be pretty close, but all a little bit off. And the reason they're off is because of the equal tempered system itself and your finger pressure. But let me show you the tempered system problem first. If you do this, remember this string is in tune. So if I play this, and we're gonna use this like a drone so we can hear pure intonation versus equal tempered intonation. This is the octave, or this was octave, right? Then we have an octave up here. We have a 5th, right? So if we do like an arpeggio, and we have like octave, 3rd is the 9th fret, and the 5th is the 7th, right? So I guess it was a little higher than the 3rd. It's like a 10th, right? So we do like. So these harmonics are. There it is. It's just above the 4th fret is the other octave. So somewhere in there, right? You hear a major arpeggio. That's E, G sharp, and B. The G sharp, it's actually flat compared to the natural. I mean, the tempered G sharp is sharp relative to the harmonic G sharp, which is. So they're meant to be a little bit off, and the reason for that is so that we can play in different keys. So I could actually play in the key of G sharp, and G sharp could be the tonic, and its 3rd, which is a B sharp or a C natural, is also going to be sharp. Okay, and with this concept in mind, we accept that this 3rd is a little sharp. We can play in any key, and the minor 3rd is also off and things like that. But in fact, a minor chord sounds very dissonant because not only do you have a G sharp overtone ringing, all these harmonics that I played are kind of ringing and shimmering out above the note, the single note. If I just played a single note and you listen close, as the sound dies away, you start hearing these other notes on top of it. That's the overtone series. But this G sharp clashes violently with the G natural here. That gives kind of the minor key its dark color. That dissonance is inside of the chord itself. But if I play a G major, there's still a dissonance. Slightly off. Okay? Now, playing in tune for me means you can do vibrato first of all. Let's show you what that is. This is E, this is an octave. So I'm going to use E major or against the low E so you can hear this intonation problem. This is supposed to be an octave. Now, if I do this, I'm rocking my finger back and forth. what's happening is the pitch is going above the E and below the E. Let me show you. Above the E is when I pull this direction. Below the E is when I pull it that way, or push towards the bridge. Okay, so in the higher positions on the neck, it's much easier, more exaggerated. So if I were to play a scale and try to intonate it relative to the harmonic series above, let's say on the D string, right there off the bat, I'm able to kind of move it around. Maybe you can't hear it that well, but this is a little flat, this is a little sharp, right? So in the case of an octave interval, I might yank it towards the headstock. When I come to the F sharp, you can move it a little towards the bridge. It depends how you land on it, okay? The third, obviously I want to flatten it because like I said, it was sharp. The fourth, again, probably want it sharper to match. Fifth, you definitely want it sharper. Sixth. And all I'm doing is the vibrato technique, however, very slowly, right? Instead of going, I'm going like. So whenever I'm playing a melody, and let's say I hear that chord behind me, maybe I'm not playing with myself, I hear a band, I'm adjusting that note so that it fits better with the song. And it's a real simple thing, this way or that way. Sometimes when you come in on a note, you might be coming in, and then you, or like the, let's say we're playing a scale. See, I have a lot of room to play, especially up here. Over here's a little bit less room, right? Now I actually double check this because I'm yanking the string hard enough that I almost throw it off. But let me show you. And you might notice something where you have this, and then you change the harmony. Violently clashing. This one matches better. Anyway, I'm just doing that with the gentle. It's not. I'm not pulling really. I'm not squeezing really tightly to make this happen. At least with the, maybe on a steel string guitar with high action or high tension strings, it's a little bit more difficult to do. But on the nylon string guitar, you have a lot of room to play around. And I'm just using the bass strings. And a couple people said, "Oh, you can only do this with bass strings." No, you can do it with any of the notes. Same thing. Okay, now, if you play really fast, it's not going to matter as much because you're not sitting on a note long enough for it to really be a problem or anything like that. But if you're playing a melody and you really want it to sound sweet, you manipulate that note just a little bit. Some guys are really into the scalped fingerboard because it really, you can just push a little bit and you really have a lot, even more room that you can mess around with the intonation, and that's why they like it. It's because they feel a nice grip on the string where they can shape the note pitch-wise to match what they want. In addition to being able to do bends, exaggerated bends, no problem, right? Now somebody else said, oh, those are single notes relative to like a drone or a chord or another musician that you're playing along with. Single notes seem easy enough for most people to get the handle of. Now what about chords? Well, let's start first with intervals, okay? So one of the first intervals you can encounter, and this I'll do up here again, it's easier to exaggerate it up here, but this applies anywhere on the neck, okay? The first fret is kind of tricky to manipulate, the first fret, because you have a very high thing going on here. This is the nut. Okay, so you got a much higher thing that you're dealing with, but there, starting from the second fret, you can actually really do some damage with this. Anyway, now we said before, I wanted this note a little bit up and a little bit out that way, right? So I might, versus this is the same interval. I'm literally moving it around in the fret wire. You can hear the pitch change. Okay? Now sometimes I might have a situation where I want this note lower than this one. You know, so in other words, in this case, I can pull them both back together. But in this case, I want it more consonant with the major third or the sixth. Sorry, it's the sixth. I'm thinking this is the third of a B, right? What I'm doing there is I'm literally going like this, very gently, but enough to make that difference in intonation. So this note is going sharp a little bit by pulling this way towards the headstock, and this one's going a little flat, going towards the bridge. And by doing that, versus, right? Now you can have the opposite thing happen here. Let's say with this chord, let's say I wanted this. Let's see, let me find something good here. Something like this. Okay, in this case, I'm doing the opposite. I want my second to be a little bit sharp. This is flat. It's a little bit sharper, right? So I'm pulling the index that way, and the ring finger, I want it down. I want it to go down, so I have more of a true sixth here. And what I'm doing there is the opposite of the other one. This one I was kind of pinching inwards, and this one I'm spreading outward my fingers. So I'm literally spreading like this inside the fret itself. And there you can hear the note kind of like coming in. Something like I said, you might not you jump in there fast, and then you do it after you get there, so that you can, you know, as everything's settling down. Maybe this you hit too hard or whatever, and the intonation really starts getting noticeable all of a sudden. So you know, I kind of ease into it rather than just try to make it precise. Over time, you do this instinctively with your ear. You can sense when a note feels a little flat or sharp, and you can adjust it. A piece by Manolo Sanlúcar used to use a lot this as an example for students. Here's a good one. Yeah, otherwise you come in, it's no good. If you do like this, that's really sweet. You do that. Here's another one. You know, you can really mess with it to get a really nice sound in terms of your intonation. Now, sometimes if you notice you're having to do it a little bit more than you normally would have relative to a note, again, it could be your strings going bad. Like, these are really bad. I'm really exaggerating this thing for two reasons. One, I'm trying to show it to you, and two, the strings are really old and they're not true like they were when they were new. So, you know, it's good to say, if you don't want to have to work too hard, change the strings, okay? But other thing is you just could be going off tune a little bit, you know, so. But usually, you know, even in a brand new set of strings, there could be something wrong, you know, and the only way to check it really is you play, you know. Once they're settled and they're not, you know, stretching down or up or whatever, I tend to tune sharp at first because they want to go down, and I'll let it settle down. I might tune a whole guitar half step sharp if it's a whole set of strings. So after a couple days, they settle down, and then you don't need to wind them up constantly all the time. You just tune them relative to each other. But I mean, you can do, the guitar is very sensitive. The strings are super sensitive. You take your guitar outside, it's going to change as soon as you walk out the door. Sometimes I just go to a different room, and there's a, you know, the strings get affected by temperature, and the guitar gets affected by humidity, and all of that stuff. So it's really important to, you know, not blame the guitar on the intonation problems. Usually the strings, And then once let's say you've got your guitar in tune, it could be just you. Like you touching the string affects it. Like the temperature of your fingers is affecting the note. And the strings are going sharp as you warm up, for example. Or they could be going flat if you're bending or playing too hard over here. You'll be like whacking the strings, pulling them against the nut up here, and you know it'll go out of tune little by little. So you got to stay on top of it. And the best tool for that is your ear. Just learn how to hear if something's in tune or not, and fix it while you're playing. And somebody said, oh, treble strings are harder to do. No, it's the same thing. If you pull back towards the nut, it sounds horrible. If you push towards the bridge, the third, it starts to sound sweeter. But you can overdo it, so be careful. You know, don't. There's a lot of room to play every string. Every string that you got to fret in there, you can mess around with this, you know. And you don't have to squeeze too hard that you're gonna hurt your fingertips or whatever. And like I said, you can do it in chords too. Now this is where I hear people tune their guitar just fine, and then they play like a bar chord, and the middle finger here just starts doing this. That's enough to really screw up your chord. Why? I can't say how many people I see doing that, you know. I mean, it's a technical thing, your technique. You have to learn to use your ear and play that chord in tune. Be careful, be careful how you're throwing your fingers into those frets. Don't just do it randomly and expect it to just be fine and then blame the guitar, like, hey, this guitar sounds out of tune, you know, or something wrong with the guitar. You know, like when I go up here, it just starts getting sharp, you know. That's why they compensate the bridge. They pull it back so it goes flat on purpose for all the people that just throw their finger and yank it this direction. A lot of people don't realize you go in the other direction and you're compensating already. You know, that's why I don't see the need for compensation here. You just got to learn how to play in tune better, you know. My father's guitar is very highly compensated, and I realized that much years later, but I always knew that when I went up the neck, it was going flat, so I pull back towards the headstock when I play it. And now I know why. It's because they literally, the luthier, put the bridge farther back so that it was going flat as you go up the scale. Anyway, hope this video helps you out and find it interesting, and have fun.